What do light bulbs and sneakers have in common with the Mona Lisa and the Sistine Chapel? At first, it may not be obvious to you, but all of these things represent incredible works of creativity. So during the 14th century Renaissance, that creativity really manifested itself in incredible works of art. During that time, there was really a perfect storm of political, social, economic factors that converged to make creativity, particularly in art and architecture, the path to individual and group and really community success. There's trends that we're facing today that make me think that we're in a modern day Renaissance. Instead of thinking about creative art, though, we need to consider creativity in the form of ideas. And so today I'd like to share with you some of the trends that I believe put us into that modern day Renaissance, and then discuss, as Helen mentioned, some of the ways that we may be able to foster creativity in ourselves and others. So first, the trends. Number one, I think we would all agree that the nature of employment in our society has changed over time. It's no longer the case that most of us will work for large corporations or organizations for 25, 30, 40 years and then retire with a pension. It's much more likely that we'll have to manage our careers and think about creatively looking for new opportunities to advance our careers by jumping from organization to organization. And so just on the face of it, trend one leads us, it compels us to be more creative. In the last century, speaking of our second trend, in the last century, the path to success was often was down the road of quantitative professions. Right? So in the last century, you could be very successful by learning the basic skills of being an accountant, an engineer, a lawyer, a scientist. Technology, though, has made a lot of those professions susceptible to digitization and codifiability. And so in many of those occupations, the job tasks are being outsourced to lowest bidders in the global marketplace. Right? So we're all familiar with the radiologist who sits in a remote location and reads x-rays from multiple hospitals, eliminating the need for a radiologist in those multiple hospitals. Likewise, I'm sure most of us in this room are familiar with tax software that enables us, without a CPA helping us, to submit our income tax returns. Even in engineering, the digitization of plans and drawings enables companies, enables communities to go out into the global marketplace to see competitive bids, completely eliminating any competitive advantage that local engineering firms may have. So as you can see, trend number two is driving us towards thinking about how we might differentiate ourselves in these occupations that are susceptible to digitization and codifiability. Organizations themselves are increasingly asking directly of their employees to think creatively. Companies like Google, 3M, W.L. Gore, they make Gore-Tex, DuPont, they're explicitly telling their employees to spend up to 20% of their time thinking creatively about new opportunities, in much the same way that you would expect someone who's an entrepreneur to do that same thing. Finally, there's some direct empirical data that speaks to the issue of creativity and its increased importance. In a recent survey of Fortune 500 CEOs, 60% indicated that creativity was a more important characteristic than intelligence for their future hires. Think about the power of that data point. In another survey that IBM just recently did of 1,500 CEOs, CEOs were asked what types of leadership characteristics they were seeking for the next 5 to 10 years. Creativity was the number one most sought after characteristic of future leaders in these organizations. More important than integrity, more important than global mindset, more important than intelligence. So as you can see, there we can build a case of several ideas and trends that have led to a heightened awareness and a heightened importance for creativity. So where does that lead us? If you buy that premise, how can we foster creativity in ourselves and others? Well, let's first take a step back and think about what that means. Creative ideas. What are ideas? Well, ideas represent a tremendous opportunity because they're free and they're potentially limitless. So while all the examples I gave had something to do with for-profit industry, think about nonprofits or mission-driven organizations where resources are completely restrained or very, very limited. Ideas represent a limitless supply of incredibly valuable resources. We know, however, though, from research, there are some estimates that say 3,000 ideas are needed to come up with one significantly valuable idea. So that's the challenge. So I really still haven't said where ideas come from, but we're getting a little bit of a sense of what ideas are. Ideas, like art, often lie at the intersection of different perspectives. So the Mona Lisa, the Sistine Chapel, and the Renaissance in general, the art of the Renaissance, oftentimes the greatest works come at the collision point of different perspectives and different mediums and different takes on the world that add up to something new and different. And we know that ideas, like art, are a creative outcome that also happens at the collision point of different types of knowledge, different types of information, and other ideas. This process is called bisociation, the linking of seemingly unrelated ideas and concepts to come up with a new idea or concept. So history's full of examples of things that have been bisociated. My favorite example is the printing press. Gutenberg, armed with the knowledge that books needed to be copied, and also with an appreciation for wine and wine presses, linked these two seemingly unrelated ideas to come up with what was perhaps the most transformative invention of the modern era. Thomas Edison, although it may seem obvious to us now, took light and electricity and combined them together for the light bulb. The shoes on your feet might be a result of bisociation. Bill Bowerman at the University of Oregon looked at his waffle iron and rubber and decided that he would create a running shoe that became Nike. Completely unrelated ideas. Even in mission-driven and the social enterprise, we have microfinance as the bisociation of venture capital principles and poverty that resulted in a business model that has enhanced the lives of the needy in the emerging markets throughout the world. It is difficult, and in my research, I have yet to come up with a new idea that doesn't somehow bring together different types of ideas, different sources of knowledge. So now, armed with a better understanding of where ideas come from, we can think about prescriptions to coming up with new ideas. And so I've arrived at 4 that I think we can all work on and be part of. So individually, number 1, individually, we need to expose ourselves to new experiences, new perspectives, new sources of knowledge, different people. If bisociation is about bringing together ideas from different areas, it seems fairly simple to at least expose ourselves to different bits and pieces of knowledge that then maybe we can collide together. And so as educators, we focus on pushing the envelope up the pedagogical spectrum from critical thinking to creative problem solvers. It is far easier to be the art critic than the artist, but we need to think of ourselves as artists and creative problem solvers. Number 2, we need to challenge ourselves. Motivation, we know, is largely impacted by the goals that we set for ourselves. And anecdotally, many people think about ideas as something that happens in a brilliant, insightful aha moment. But what we know from our research tells us that Thomas Edison was right. Actually, within invention lies 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And we know that individuals that purposefully set out to come up with new ideas, that set challenging goals for themselves and give themselves the freedom to achieve them, will foster and develop more ideas, more transformative ideas at that. Another way of fostering creativity in ourselves and others is by seeking out those that are different from us. So again, bisociation would dictate that if we bring together individuals with different perspectives, different types of education, different backgrounds, that we will increase the set of information from which we can find collisions and points of intersection. Here at Villanova and at other institutions of higher education, a lot of this is manifest through interdisciplinary studies. Right here at Villanova, we're working on looking for opportunities to collide across colleges into cross-college initiatives where we bring about different perspectives. This is also indicative and another evidence, a point of evidence for diversity. Right? So diversity is a social justice issue, but also from the perspective of creativity, we would like to enhance diversity within groups and organizations to bring about better ideation. Finally, new ideas are very risky. Ideas challenge the status quo. Just like an entrepreneur comes up with something new, is challenging the marketplace, it takes a fair amount of bravery to stand up and say, my idea is different than what we're doing right now. And so it's very risky. And so as a culture and as part of the community, we need to think about supporting that type of risk and those types of risk takers. If 3,000 ideas are needed for one good one, there's going to be a lot of failure. We need to reward failure and instead reward action and people who take those risks. So in closing, I hope that you agree that there is an imperative for us to think about being more creative. We're in a modern day renaissance. The people that are most successful, like in that era in the art world, will be those who get this, who can think about new ideas. We need to expose ourselves to new experiences, different types of people. We need to purposefully look for points of collision and bisociating things we know and also things that other people know. We also need to support failure. We need to think about risk takers as people who have the solution to the world's problems of the future. We need to change what we think and how we do it. Thank you very much.